Welcome to HCA Talks Health. I'm Zena le Roux, and today I'll be speaking to Giles Watkins. Giles is a coach and a mentor with over 30 years of global business and general management experience, and specifically in enabling decision makers to solve problems, achieve balance, and deliver superior results, and sleep better at night. Which I think is probably the most important part. So he's also the author of Positive Sleep, a holistic approach to resolve sleep issues and transform your life. So welcome, Giles.
Hi, Zena. Good to see you.
So let's start with the title of your book, The Positive Sleep. What does that mean?
Well, I think there's a huge... Well, firstly, thanks for having me on the show. Really enjoy talking about sleep. I think there's a lot of publicity being about sleep now. Say there wasn't 10 years ago when I first started researching the subject. It was less written about, less talked about in the media. And what I noticed was a lot of people and researchers and a lot of the academic stuff that came out focused on the negatives. So if you don't get enough sleep, whether that be quality or quantity or sometimes some slightly arbitrary number as to what might be enough, then these bad things will happen. And when I studied the subject as part of my master's program, there were two different sources I looked at as some of the ailments that occur. One was an American source and one was a European source. And the American source had 75 ailments that you could suffer from, and I think the European source had 85 or something like that. So it's obviously to do with different categorizations, but just about everything you can think of that you might feel is wrong with you could be traced back to sleep. So for me, it was about turning it the other way around and saying, actually, if you can sleep better, whether it be quality or quantity, if you can feel more rested in the day, what are the benefits going to be? Because to me, when I did manage to bring that about in my life, it was truly life-changing. So I guess I'm an optimist, half glass, half full sort of person. I thought I'd rather give the positive spin to it. So that's where the name came from, really.
Oh, I really like that. So really focusing on what the sleep can do for you instead of how it will, make life difficult for you if you're not getting enough, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I know that many people don't realize in what a positive way sleep can impact their lives, right? And I've heard it so often, and I'm sure you as well, where people tell, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I'm not gonna, it's not a priority in my
Well,
life.
they can certainly hasten your death if you don't sleep very well. So,
Yeah, exactly. So how do you respond to someone when they tell you this?
well, it doesn't actually happen that often to me. I find very rarely, if people find out what I do, the vast majority, it sparks a conversation. It is really rare that someone just shuts me down or just doesn't show some interest these days. So I think if someone was to say to me, what are some of the things that I may be experiencing because of lack of sleep, then often it will be things, it won't be so much the physical things, it'll be more the mental things. I went through a phase in 2010, I think it was. I changed jobs and worked for a company whose name I don't even utter anymore. It was that bad, Zena. So I don't even mention their name. But I went through a phase where I literally slept for about 3 hours a night for a month.
Ooh.
And the sensation I had was like, I felt like I was a sack of potatoes lugging myself around. I could just about physically get through the day with the occasional nap in the back of a taxi or something. But what I felt was all the emotions and the issues from the previous day I would be carrying forward. So physically, I just about recovered, but mentally I didn't. So for all those people who say, I'll sleep when I'm dead, most of the research suggests that the first part of the night, or the first 3 hours or 4.5 hours, the first 2 or 3 sleep cycles you get, are the physical recovery. The rest are more around the brain and the cognitive piece. And towards the end of the night, essentially, it's like we're getting up, we're processing what happened the previous day, we're filing the memories, we're producing, if you like, a new operating system in our brain every night for the next day. And interesting enough, some of the research suggests that we're sort of dampening down some of the emotions that go around those memories. So if something really bad happened the day before, my sense is the following day we should have processed it. So we're taking the learnings from that. So what were the lessons? But also we don't feel quite the same vivid emotion or upset about it as we did before. So I think that's where, and I remember that. I remember that sense of carrying the trauma, if you like, forward each day and just sort of stacking on top of each other. And now I sleep a lot better. I obviously don't have that sensation. So that's quite a long answer, but that's probably why it's good to sleep while you're alive and focus on getting some quality and quantity rest as well.
Yeah, so it's almost like that filing is not taking place, right? And I'm sure that also impacts your, other areas of the brain, like memory and, some other areas like the prefrontal cortex, right? That's also responsible for the higher order cognitive processes,
Absolutely.
such as the planning and the executive plans and all of those things. And you work quite a lot with leaders in companies, right? So I'm sure this is quite a big part of selling it to them, although I think most people are aware of it, the benefits.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, Zena. If I'm talking to an audience of people in their 20s and 30s, particularly those that maybe either work for other people or are still students or whatever, I often focus on things like sports and physical performance and that sort of thing. When you talk to an older age group, which is much more likely to maybe been running their own business for a number of years or have more senior leadership positions in large organizations, then this is much more what the areas which excite interest, along with conversations about the link between poor sleep and Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Because as one gets older, obviously that becomes something more that one relates to, possibly because one has, older parents or friends or something like that who are experiencing that sort of thing, and that is a definite link. So, but if I'm talking, say, a group of, as I will often do, a group of, say, a dozen people running their own businesses or second in command of a business or something like that, there are 4 particular areas that have been well researched that leaders particularly can fall down on if they're not getting enough sleep, but equally, of course, to use the positive sleep phrase, improve massively in if they do get good sleep. And the first one is normally around results orientation, because if you are really knackered, basically, to use a technical term, if you're only sleeping, say, 4 hours a night on a continuous basis, that is equivalent to having a blood alcohol level that is over the legal limit to drive, for example. Okay, and we know when we've had a couple of drinks and we're probably not at our sharpest, that means we're not quite as focused on results as we might be, but also it can have some other ramifications emotionally as well. But basically, that ability to focus on the bigger picture and also to dive in to look at the smaller stuff that will struggle with that. So that's the results orientation certainly suffers. Another area is problem solving. Now, if you, like me, love an afternoon nap, I don't always get an afternoon nap, and I know there's many people that will tell you they either can't nap, or if they do, they wake up feeling so groggy they wish they hadn't had the nap. But I'm one of those blessed people that can sit in a chair or lie down for half an hour, get a quick nap and get up in the afternoon. So if I'm working from home, I sometimes do that. I try to set the diary to allow it if I'm in a place where I'll be able to. And then sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Just depends on how I'm feeling. But if I do, I then get up and start looking at a spreadsheet or something analytical. I will spot patterns much quicker. Right? So things like pattern recognition particularly useful for people in the professional services area. I mean, consultants particularly, a lot of what a consultant do is they're looking for patterns and looking for repeated issues, which might have some similar options to address those issues. That massively improves when you've slept well.
How long do you nap for, though? Is it a 10-minute, 30-minute?
That's a great question. There are supposedly two optimum types of nap. One is the full 90-minute full sleep cycle nap, which is probably more available to most of us either on a Saturday night out, Saturday afternoon after a Friday night out, or a Sunday afternoon after a Saturday night out, or when we're not working. Okay. But for other people, NASA did a load of research on this in the days of putting the first astronauts up into space, the late 60s and early 70s, and came up with 26 minutes. Don't ask me why it's not 25 or 27. I often thought it was some attention-seeking scientist who thought, if I make it a really unusual, idiosyncratic number, I'll get more attention for my finding. But it's approximately 20 to 30 minutes anyway. And Italians I've met call that a napspresso sometimes, because apparently if you have an espresso and you lie down, within half an hour it's going to wake you up. So there's another theory around that as well. But that's like the short power nap.
Wonderful.
And I often find that if I do, it's amazing how often if I do give myself the chance to have a nap, it will either be about 25 to 30 minutes or occasionally the full 90.
Oh, wow. And then was it easier for you? Sorry, we'll get to the other two as well. Just one question. So was it easier for you to fall asleep when napping compared to in the evening when you were only sleeping 3 hours? Was it because of other reasons?
If I napped.
Yeah.
If I napped, gosh, yes. I mean, I was spent most of the day hoping for a nap. Yeah, I mean, in my worst times. I mean, that 2010 period was a very extreme time, and that was related to a business owner who I said I won't mention the name of the business because I feel that strongly against them, who was asking me to basically do Mission Impossible, and I was struggling with that. Later on, when I was still sleeping quite poorly, I had a role in a business where I was the managing director, had my own office, had a window in the door, but I let my PA in on my sleep troubles, and she had a sign made to go over the window that said "Do not," or "Meeting in progress," or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And I had a sofa in the office, and I would literally say to Irene, "Okay, I'm taking half an hour," put the sign up, shut the door, unplug the phone in the old days of having the plug-in phone, and within a couple of minutes I'd be off because I was so shattered. And then she knew in half an hour to knock on the door, and so I do that quite regularly. Yeah. So yes, I mean, it was much easier for me to fall asleep. But going back to the other two things that I wanted to highlight for leaders, a third, which is so important. I mean, the best leaders that I've known have been people who can harness their team and can seek different perspectives and actually actively seek different perspectives. Wants some element of not violent conflict, but at least different perspectives to bring to a table to come up with the best options or a range of options for it to solve a series of challenges and move a business forward and improve a business. And most business leaders who have not had a good night's sleep really struggle with other viewpoints. They really struggle to process them. They struggle to listen to them. And that really also, there's a strong impact on the cognitive ability to learn, to both learn something, encode it, retrieve it, as well as seek those perspectives. So it's just, there's no upside really in that space if you're short of sleep. And I look back on that and I think I can think of multiple examples where that's been the case. One particular guy who was in my leadership team, who was my supply chain director when I was running the business in Sri Lanka, and he always came in at 5 to 5 after the day-long management monthly meeting and just, oh, Giles, I've just thought, you know, that thing we've just agreed? Well, I've just thought of 2 reasons as to why we might not want to make that agreement. So, and because I was short of sleep, I would send him away with a flea in his ear and told him we've all made the decision. And what I should have done was said, you are a reflective thinker. You are someone that continues to think of, almost like a percolator, a coffee machine. He was that sort of guy. He would think of things the next day, and often they were really good. But because I was shattered, I couldn't cope with that. And what I should have said was, JJ, that's probably a great idea. Can you drop me an email? Let's talk at 8:30 tomorrow morning. And we'll just let's have time for reflection on it. But like many a leader who's tired, once you've made a decision, it's quite difficult to revisit the decision. You don't revisit every decision, but there are times, especially with that certain type of person, where that's worth it.
Yes.
And the last one links to that. I mean, there's probably an overlap, Zena, between that point and the supporting others point, which is that it's very difficult to really understand and take in other people's points of view properly and support them properly when you're tired. And I often think that, you know, there's so many employee engagement initiatives around the world in large corporates. If they could actually spend the money or find ways to support their leaders to sleep better, the leaders would be better able to listen to their employees and engage with them properly and listen to the non-verbals as well as the verbals. And they wouldn't need all these employee engagement initiatives. So it's I really think that would be if I had a magic wand, that's one of the things I'd try and correct in corporates, because I've seen so many of these. And I think the whole growth of coaching, I mean, I know we're talking to an audience of coaches here, the growth of that industry is partly because of increasingly frazzled and poorly rested leaders who aren't able to empathize and engage with their employees properly, who then seek support in other areas, if you like. Yeah. So I think, you know, the research shows that the more sleep deprived we are, the more we struggle to read the cues from people, which of course we know are very likely to be non-verbal, at least as much as verbal. And as a result, leaders tend to be much less able to engage with people.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And it really, you know, it kind of comes together where you said it's not just about improving the sleep, but it transformed your life, right? And it can transform a company. Imagine if a leader was able to really listen and really use the ideas from all the employees. I mean, that could transform everything. So it is extremely powerful. Yeah.
And I mean, so often now, if I go in and I'm doing sort of non-sleep work, I'm doing, say, transformation work or an assessment of a business, and a leader's called me in to do that, and you get people around the room to discuss options and so forth. So often you'll find there's just it's almost like breaking a dam. There's a whole bunch of ideas that people have got, but they haven't felt that they could share them. And it's not because the leader's a bad person. It's probably because they're just tired and stressed and fraught and working, you know, in the business rather on it, and really in that sort of feeling they're in the trenches. And as a result, they struggle to listen to others. And probably if they were a bit better rested and a bit better able to delegate and step back a little bit more, then those in the team would feel more able to come forward with those suggestions, and they themselves as leaders would be in a better place to actually hear them.
And everyone would benefit. Do you know what the percentage-wise, how many people are sleep deprived? Do you have more or less an idea?
Every time I see a stat, I think it can't be that low. So the stats I see tend to be sort of in the 15 to 20% of adults range. at any one time, yet probably at least half of all adults at some stage have experienced sleep deprivation in their lives. But if you said to me, of the people I meet, and that this is an anecdotal sample, not a scientific sample, it feels more like 2/3 to 3/4. And there are obvious professions where you find it a lot more. I mean, cab drivers, my goodness, if you want to talk to a taxi driver about sleep, they love the topic, often because they work irregular hours, particularly people who work irregular or shift hours. They are the ones who particularly like to talk about it, and that's a lot of people.
It is. And definitely, also in my own work, I do come across this quite often. It's one of the main health concerns that people have is the quality of their sleep. But I mean, if let's say it's 50% of the people, even a quarter of the people out there, and sleep deprivation can make our responses comparable to being drunk on the road, I mean, that's scary, isn't it? Isn't it dangerous? Shouldn't there be stricter rules around that thing?
There is talk, I believe, and I don't know if this is technologically possible yet, but there's talk certainly in America, and certainly America and Australia, probably because of the power of private health and the size of the private health industry there compared to some other countries. I've heard talk of like a sort of sleep breathalyzer coming in,
really,
in some way, because apparently, and I've read this, and this is the last couple of years, the deaths through drink driving in the US is really on the decline, and it's suggested the deaths through driving and falling asleep at the wheel and so forth is on the increase, and now that is more significant than drink driving deaths in the US. That's what I understand. So I'm pretty sure that either the technology isn't far away or people are working on that technology, because as you say, it is a lifesaver, a life changer, and I'd love to see it then a bit like it's been applied, say for example, I was in the oil industry for many years. If you were working on a challenging situation at the weekend and you were called in for something as an oil trader, you'd have to blow into a breathalyzer before you started work. Right? They wouldn't let anyone, especially at the weekend or in the evening, work if they were over the limit on alcohol. Well, you can imagine the same thing could come in around sleep if the technology was there.
Yeah, wow. So I think the most important thing in the end is, okay, so, what can we do? I think many people are sleep deprived, but some people really struggle. They've tried many things and many different strategies and techniques, and maybe it's just not working for them. So, that's what your book is all about. So it's a really good read, and I would recommend anyone struggling with sleep or just wanting to make any small improvements in their life to really read the book. But maybe you can share a few strategies with us. What worked for you? So you used a more of a holistic approach, right? Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Right. Well, I got to a point where I was able to study my sleep as part of a master's program that I was doing mostly at 3 a.m. because I was still running a business at the same time. So I wouldn't really recommend that, but that's how I did it. It took me a couple of years to write the thesis, and then another couple to sort of get commissioned to write the book and edit the book. So it's quite a long process, if you like. But the things that made a big difference to me, firstly, I used a technique called body scanning. So my sleep was not going to sleep. My issue was not going to sleep. It was waking at 3 a.m. and not being able to go back to sleep, which is, I think, widely called maintenance insomnia, and is the most common form of insomnia. The number of people you meet that have that issue is huge. Now, so that was my biggest challenge. So I use a technique called body scanning. If you happen to have the book, I think it's about page 18 or 19. It's quite a well-known mindfulness technique. You can do it. There's no excuses not to have a go at this one, Zena. Anybody can try this, right? You're just lying there, and you literally start by scanning your body from your head to your toe, or your toe to your head. Doesn't matter. Okay. And at each, I combine it with some gratitude. I think that's, again, positive sleep. I like to try to take the positive angle on things. So I'll say, thank you to the top of my head for kind of keeping the rain out and keeping my brain in, because I've learned that brains don't sort of form a nice little shape that you see in the textbooks, but they'll go everywhere if given the opportunity to. And then I'll say thanks very much, and I'll kind of focus on that for 5 seconds, and then I'll move to my forehead, then I'll move to my eyebrows, then I'll move to my nose, and I work my way down the body, 5 to 10 seconds on each one, very approximately. If you try that, one of two things will happen. One of three things will happen. Well, first thing, when you try it, by the time you get to your mouth, you'll suddenly think, oh my goodness, I haven't put the bins out, or I've forgotten the dentist appointment, or whatever it is, all right? So there will be something that will come in, like any form of meditation, that will distract you. And I just urge you, as you try it, to just say, thanks very much. Some people keep a notepad by the side of the bed and just scribble something down, and then go back to the process. Keep with the process. Do it over and it takes many people several nights to do it. And again, one of a couple of things will happen. Either you start to find that maybe by the time you got to the toes, but before you got back to the top of your head again, you'll be asleep. Or you'll find that you go into a kind of Zen-like state, quite a powerful, relaxed state, which is not quite the same as being asleep, but is a lot better than the state you were in before. And it gives you some opportunity to rest. So that, to me, was a big win for me, and I think is a big win for many people. Another top tip in my book, which is harder when you're younger, I think, I'm making a sweeping generalization, and not maybe quite so difficult as you get older, is to have approximately the same going to bed and waking up time. Because one of the systems that helps us sleep is the circadian rhythm, the circadian clock, the body clock. You're nodding there because obviously that comes into so much of the work that you would do. And that clock responds to regularity. So now, because I tend to go to bed between 10 and 10:30, and I tend to get up about 5:30, that works for me. That I sleep better. I went to a 60th birthday party the other week, and I was out till 3 a.m. and it took me 4 days to recover. Not because I drank shed loads, but because it just took days to recover from the disruption to my sleep. I felt different, so I do find that if I can keep in a fairly regular rhythm of, I don't know, half an hour-ish approximately, it's kind of window of about half an hour either for getting up and going to bed, that helps a lot. And a third thing I'd mention, and I could mention 20 things, but a third thing I'd mention is actually magnesium. Our bodies like magnesium. It's good for all sorts of things, not just bones, but it also is good for relaxation. It's good for quite a few aspects of life. However, we don't produce it. And because we don't produce it, we've got to take it in. Now, you could take it in through broccoli. You can take it in through some other foods. You can take it in through an Epsom salt bath or various sprays that contain magnesium and so forth. But a lot of people don't know that, and hence they're magnesium deficient. And not being magnesium deficient helps you be more balanced, less stressed, and sleep better. So I will often take 3 or 4 capsules about an hour or two before I go to bed of magnesium. You can take it in powdered form as well. And as I said, you can take it through having an Epsom salt bath or some other ways too. But that's one way, as part of your kind of going to bed routine. After dinner, you can take it. I often have it with chamomile tea. That's a personal favorite of mine, but other people don't like that, but that works for me. And that's part of my sort of signaling that I'm starting to go to bed ritual, as well as helping me relax. So I found those 3 things, if I think about the people I've worked with, both in groups and one-to-one, those are 3 of the things that seem to be most powerful for others as well.
So it's really about promoting calm. Right, with even with the body scan, because I know that
Yeah,
many people have lots of anxiety when they wake up at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock,
yeah,
and they know, oh gosh, I've got a really busy day tomorrow. So even if it's not helping you to fall asleep again, at least you're going into that state where you're more in a relaxed space, and it's still restorative to the body to a certain degree. So I really like that one. But also having that regular rhythm, and yeah, the magnesium. I think many people are not aware of how deficient we are, right? So
yeah.
it could make a big difference, and starting with something that feels doable. Like you said, you can share 20 things with us today, but
Yeah.
making it practical, making it doable, so the already sleep deprived person doesn't feel overwhelmed, right? It's doable.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the people often talk to me about the wearables and the Fitbits and the Aura rings. There are some fantastic, an increasing number of fantastic technological aids that you can use around sleep. Well, my question to those people, having used some of those in the past myself, is purely, in many cases, what those are doing is giving you more data about the problem, which for some people then just makes them more anxious. Some people can harvest that data and then do something with it, and then start to maybe take a practical step, like thinking, well, if I start with a regular bedtime, maybe that's going to help me, or something like that.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, it just makes them more anxious. And you're talking about the inverse of calm, you're talking about. And linked to that is the alarm clock.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wake up at 2:38 and there's a big glowing digital clock telling you it's 2:38, there is no upside to that,
Yeah.
unless you have to get up at 2:39, right? If you don't have to get up at 2:39, either turn that alarm clock round so those digits are facing the wall, so you don't know the time,
Yeah.
or even better, probably have it outside the bedroom or something if you have to have an alarm clock. There is no upside that I can think of when you wake in the middle of the night to know what the time is, because it will just make you more anxious. Far better to think, I'm awake now, I don't feel that easy to get back to sleep. Let me try a technique like body scanning to see if I can get a little bit calmer. And when it's 6 o'clock, either the sun will start coming up, or the alarm will go off, or whatever will happen that normally triggers that, or 7 o'clock, whatever time it is that we need to start the day. So many people are creating circumstances. It's a bit like in this country, we have the 10 o'clock news. It's a kind of ritual. Millions of people watch it and then go to bed and wonder why they wake up. Well, I'm not against the news. I'm just saying, if that's the last thing you do before you go to bed and the news is not great, how does that help you sleep?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, these are all real practical things that could help us. But also, when we're looking at the bigger picture, there are other elements that also come into play, right? So, for example, the way we, or our attitude towards relationships and others and ourselves, right? And you mentioned in your book that this is often the case for many people, where if maybe the way they suppress emotions, or maybe they're in the habit of not speaking up. How does that impact sleep? Do you
Oh
think?
yeah. Well, I think we were just touching on it before you went on now. I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking to an Englishman here, so we are kind of world champions at suppressing our emotions and not speaking up.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. If you're bottling things up,
Mm.
it is there's you got to find a way of letting that out,
Mm.
whether it be in the moment or shortly afterwards in a way that you find easier. For me, certainly going back and starting to do more sport was part of my addressing my
Mm.
issues. I'm a later father. I was 40 when my son was born, and so for me, there was a big incentive to both find ways of letting my frustrations and some of the issues I had out in sport, but also keeping fit, because we can still play tennis together. And he's nearly 18 now, so that's not bad. So things like that. So being able to enjoy sport with him. So yeah, the culture's like the culture I live in and was born in, where emotions are suppressed more. That is not healthy for sleep. I don't think there's any
Yeah.
question about it.
Yeah, of course, because that's what's going to bottle up when you're lying
Yeah,
there. I
yeah,
mean, if you're not dealing
absolutely.
with it throughout the day, it's gonna,
It's going
it's
to
gonna come
pop back at
find you.
night.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. But it's often the way that we've been conditioned, right?
yes,
And I think also another aspect that I think is quite common is the fact that we're so used to doing all the time, right, and being productive, being busy, right? We're not used to just being. And I think that's what sleep really confronts is like, okay, you need to go into a state of not doing, right? So there's lots of conditioning that might also play a role here, right?
absolutely. I mean, we
Yeah,
are called human beings, not human doings, yet
yeah,
we act like we're human doings. And
yeah,
so, if that ability to be and to take time, I'm I'm I've always found that a challenge. So for me, I will almost have to schedule in, if you like,
mm,
time to go for a walk or do some sport or think, no, this evening I'm just going to sit and read or whatever it happens to be. So that's something I have found a challenge and probably still do. But yes, I know that when I have proper wind down time before I go to bed, as it were, I'm not watching TV or what, I'm just allowing time to just potter and do basic domestic stuff and read and all that sort of stuff. I get better sleep. I'm better
yeah,
for it.
yeah,
No
definitely.
question.
No, definitely. So, how do you support people typically? So, I know that you work with companies and all of that, but you mentioned that you also work with individuals. So,
I
if
do.
people feel like they need more support, how can they get that?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps we can post an email or a LinkedIn link as well.
Yeah,
Giles at positivesleep.co.uk is one way to find me.
yeah,
What I do with anybody is I say you can have a 30-minute free consultation. So we'll just have a chat. All right.
yeah,
I'll see what your issues are. I'll give you a couple of suggestions. And you can go away and try that. I'll do that for anybody because I think that's only fair. And so far, I've been able to manage the volume of people who are taking it up on me, so that's fine. That might change if I get thousands, but for now, it's been okay.
yeah,
And then if someone comes back and says, "Okay, Charles, I'm starting to get some benefits. Let's build on that." So I generally then would say to someone, "Okay, let's book 5 sessions," and we would work on one suggestion at a time, pretty much, and layer on top. So I'll say, okay, so let's agree we're going to try the magnesium. You go and you I'll give some suggestions of number of droplets you might get. And in return, let's chat again in 3-4 weeks' time. And each day, I want you to write I want you to keep a sleep diary of 1 or 2 sentences. And I don't mean page, I mean 1 or 2 sentences that says, slept about 7 hours, woke twice, feeling okay, but I felt more rested.
yeah,
You might
yeah,
write that. Yeah. And just do it on a daily basis till the next period. And so what I would do then is discuss with the person whether they think that those 1 or 2 actions from the previous time helped.
yeah.
If they think yes, let's hold that and layer something else on top. If
Mm,
not, put that to one side, try something else, etc. So really take that approach. And that, with 80% of people that I work with, it works.
wow.
The 20%, normally it emerges after very, very quickly that there is a deeper
Yeah,
psychological issue, or they have some physical pain that is waking them up at night, or someone I talked to earlier this year has tinnitus, which is a particular issue that is probably stress related, and that needs different treatment.
mm,
Okay.
mm,
But for 80% of people, it's around prioritization, working on how to change habits, and then my role then becomes helping them stick to it
mm.
and layering other techniques on top of that.
Wonderful. And you do that through coaching as well, right?
Yeah,
So much.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
fantastic. Well, but that's quite a high rate, hey? To know that about 80% of us would really benefit from just making a few small tweaks, right? And these things could make such a big difference in the overall quality of our lives. right? So that's quite
that's my experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, thank you so much, Giles. Thank you for sharing your ideas with us, and yeah, putting your book out there and your own experience. I love the idea of an embodied learning, right? So you went through this journey yourself, and that's something that you can share with the people around you. And I've found that people really benefit from those types of books a lot. So thanks for sharing with us. Thanks for taking out the time. Any last thoughts? Anything that you feel like our audience still needs to hear, or do you think we've covered everything?
I think it's as simple as, a good night's sleep changes your life overnight. That sounds a bit trite, but it's absolutely the case. So if you are out there and you are really struggling, and either through looking at my book or some other way, you can think of ways to address it and really commit to it, it will change your life.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Giles. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.